Hello and welcome to Productivity Nerd, a podcast all about getting shit done, hopefully in an elegant way that doesn't leave you too broken. In our crazy worlds, we're all about balancing the need to work enough to make ends meet, enough not to annoy our bosses, but also enough that we feel like we've done enough, which can be a whole different psychological and emotional ballgame, along with the human need to rest and stay well. Plus, on top of that, we'd quite like to enjoy ourselves, maybe just a little bit along the way, spending quality time with those we love. I, for one, love hearing about how people get that balance and work more efficiently so they have more time to do the things that they love. Hi and welcome to Productivity Nerd. I'm Kathy Soulsby. Today I thought I would have a little ponder about trackers. Not as healthy as you might think chocolate granola bars of the 80s. Do you remember them? But wearable trackers, our Apple Watches, our Garmins, our Fitbits, those kind of trackers, because I've read some interesting stats about them and that kind of blew my mind. And I thought it was quite interesting because we are all, some of us, me, quite obsessed with our stats. And since Fitbits first came around, they were the ones that most of us came to first. Many of us have valued knowing about our steps, our resting heart rate, or our sleep scores. But what if knowing this stuff is actually unhelpful rather than helpful? Measuring things feels useful, doesn't it? We all want optimum performance. Why wouldn't we track everything we can to give ourselves the best possible chance at succeeding? We don't not measure our turnover. We don't not measure our work KPIs or have appraisals and all that kind of stuff. We measure things, right? If it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. But it may interest you to know that a lot of elite athletes are moving away from obsessive tracking of some of the things that we get via our smartwatches. There's a growing body of sports science around paralysis by analysis, where data monitoring is actually increasing cortisol and undermining recovery. So a 2021 paper in the International Journal of Sports, Physiology and Performance, clearly on my day-to-day reading list, looked at heart rate variability monitoring and found that athletes who obsessively checked their scores daily showed higher anxiety and worse adaptation than those who just checked weekly. So when did all this tracking malarkey start anyway, right? I mean, Fitbit launched in the UK in 2009. That was the first kind of consumer wearable that tracks steps and sleep. There were pedometers earlier, but they were a bit, pedestrian, should we say? By 2015, the market exploded. You've got Apple Watch, then you've got Garmin, who kind of increased their range, and sleep tracking became a serious selling point on most of these things, as well as just the steps. Oh, and incidentally, 10,000 steps a day that we all sort of have in our mind, it's actually Japanese marketing. It's not science. I am not messing with you. So in 1965, so pedometers have been going a while, Japanese company called Yamasata Clock, that is shocking pronunciation, I'm really sorry, launched a pedometer called Manpo-K, which literally translates as 10,000 steps meter. And that number was just picked simply because the kanji character for 10,000 looks a bit like a person walking. That's it, right? The symbol looks like somebody moving. So it was a marketing decision. It wasn't a health recommendation. But it stuck and it spread globally. And somewhere along the way, it became like a standard that everybody spouts as being the number you should walk a day. Actual research is a bit different. 2019 Harvard study of older women found that health benefits plateaued around 7,500 steps. In 2021, there was a wider study and they found benefits kicking in at 6,000 to 8,000 steps for older adults and not a lot of extra benefit of going beyond that. For younger adults, it does look like the ceiling's a bit higher. You probably want a few more steps, but there's basically no evidence anywhere that 10,000 steps means anything. So, take that off your Apple Watch as a guide. So basically, as humans, we took a made-up target, we built a whole industry around trackers around it, and now gazillions of people feel like failures if they only hit 9,400 steps a day. Or they do that terrible thing where they pace up and down the living room at 9 p.m. because you've got to get above the target. We've all done it. Admit it. We have done it. So tracking these days has increased again. Steps, distance, yada yada. We can also track our heart rate, like our continuous heart rate. As we said earlier, the heart rate variability. Some trackers will track blood oxygen. Some will track skin temperature, sleep stages like deep REM, Love a bit of REM. Sleep score, stress score. Some will track your menstrual cycles. S- Some will do an ECG. There's a VO2 max estimate. I don't even know what that is. Um, and more recently, you can also attach like a glucose monitor to your smart device, which is proving, extraordinarily useful for a lot of people. A week into using my crutches after my hip operation, my Apple Watch told me I was at an increased risk of falls. I mean, no shit, Sherlock, but how did it know? Like, it sensed I was wobbly, which I found quite fascinating and slightly over intensive, but and there's probably loads more we can track at any moment, right? And how accurate are these things? So steps, reasonably accurate. Heart rate, pretty good when you're at rest, gets a bit less accurate when you're doing like your high intensity stuff, but still, better than nothing. Sleep tracking, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is the bit that kind of prompted me to dig into this because steps are steps, right? It's useful to track. I don't think many people get that obsessive about it these days, but sleep, this one's an interesting one. So, sleep tracking on consumer wearables, as we're calling them, compares really poorly to clinical, I apologise now for the pronunciation of this, polysomnography. Polysomnography, which is the posh way of saying proper sleep recording in a lab, I'm guessing. In 2020, a study showed that while devices are decent at distinguishing sleep time from awake time, they're not that reliable when it comes to assessing your sleep stages, if you're in REM sleep or light sleep or whatever. Fitbit tends to overestimate light sleep. Most devices struggle with deep sleep. And another study found that accuracy for REM detection was around 60 to 70% across all devices. So, not as accurate as you might want, maybe. But the biggest question for me is, does knowing about your sleep make things better or worse? This I find fascinating. There's a term for it, orthosomnia, coined in 2017 by researchers at Rush University Medical Center. It describes the obsessive preoccupation with achieving a perfect sleep score. Some patients were rocking up at sleep clinics, not because they felt bad, but because their tracker said they should feel bad. Like, they literally went, yeah, my Fitbit says I'm tired. Can you help? Um, so, people who closely monitored their sleep scores reported more anxiety about sleep, not less. In some cases, this is wild, this led to actual sleep disruption. So, people lying still and like trying to pretend to be asleep for the device, or even worse, sometimes waking up in the night to check their score because it was making them that anxious. Now, I'm going to say there might be a bit of kind of intrinsic bias in that, right? If you have ongoing sleep issues and you are somebody who unfortunately suffers with insomnia, it is bloody miserable, and you're going to be stressed about it, then I suspect you're one of the first people who are going to be in line for a sleep tracker and likely to be a bit more obsessive about it. I'd be interested to know if these studies were literally a handful of, not a handful, that's going to be a terrible study. Were they people who were just all picked with no sleep trackers, given a sleep tracker and told to rock on? Or were they people who had self selected themselves to have a sleep tracker? Because I think that's a different demographic. That's just me rehashing my A level psychology, but there you go. What I find way more interesting than people trying to trick their Garmin into thinking they're asleep is the effect it has on your life kind of outside of sleep. So if you're told first thing that your sleep score was terrible, is that going to affect your day more than if you didn't know but just had a slight suspicion? That's what interests me. So there was a study done in 2019 and it found that participants who were told they'd slept poorly, whether or not they actually had, performed worse on cognitive tests. Participants who were told they slept well performed better, even when the sleep quality was exactly the same as the others. So basically, your expectation shapes your performance. If you're told you're tired, you perform like a tired person. If you're told you're well rested and you're well up for today, you're going to perform better. So a bad sleep score isn't neutral information and it can impact your day. And this should absolutely be something to think about if you check your sleep score. And I don't know about you, I certainly do check mine. If I've had what felt like a rough night's sleep and it tells me you had a perfect night's sleep, I'm like, you are lying to me. And conversely, if I wake up and feel fine and it goes, oh, bad luck, that wasn't great, was it? 70%? I'll go, oh, okay. But does that affect how I go about my day? That's interesting. Perhaps when we wake up, we need to decide ourselves how refreshed we feel or otherwise before we check the stats. And are told that, we woke up 14 times in the night and one of those times was 25 minutes. And yeah, maybe we should just go, do you know what? I'm alive. I've got coffee. Let's go with that. So wearable stats, useful, but only to a point. We know they're great for training. They're great for managing some health conditions if you need to. I know my dad has heart problems and his Fitbit has been really helpful for him in managing problems with his heart rhythm. But maybe we should accept that there are natural ups and downs in life and in sleep, and our mindset is actually much more important to our success than the number that we get given first thing in the morning. So I hope you found that interesting. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.